Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live with Cami. This is Cami Wanis, the Freedom Scholar. I'm so excited because today we're going to talk about preschool and kinder. We're talking about littles today. We're talking about common mistakes that parents make with littles. It's so common, you guys, and I'm just checking right now to make sure that I'm live real quick here. So I'm just looking in our Facebook group here just to make sure that I'm live. Oh, I see it. Perfect. Awesome. If you're joining me today, go ahead and say a little hello in the comments. I'm so excited that you're with us. We have a lot of parents. Yeah, so we have a lot of parents lately that are new parents and they have littles and they're starting to get out there and they're starting to get really into they're not even thinking about homes or school at all. They're only thinking about homeschooling, and that's something that we want to make sure that we start off on the right track. Right, we start off on the right track, and we all want to do what's best for our kids. And I've never talked to a parent that's ever said, "Oh, I just want to, just get by. I just want to do the things and just make it through." That may be where they end up because things haven't gone well, but they've never said that that's their goal. And so that's one thing that I want to talk about today is trying not to end up there. We don't want to end up in a place where we're like, "Ugh, this wasn't really where I planned to be." And a lot of times that comes from people making mistakes and making them in the beginning. So, I'm going to talk about those common mistakes today. It's something that you definitely want to make sure that you keep in mind. And they're so easy to fall in because a lot of it has to do with what our general thinking about education is. And I'll talk about more in that about that in a second, but what the problem is that when we get to those places where we're making these mistakes, and guess what? I've made all of these mistakes. Every single one of them. We're going to talk about 5 in particular, 5 mistakes, and I made all of them. All of them. So, don't feel like you're alone. It's definitely something where I've made all of them, and I've lowered my son's love of learning because of it. When he was little, we started out this way, and I made all these mistakes, and it was from my training as a classroom teacher, but then also from just the world and my own expectations and my own what I think homeschooling, was going to look like for me and what I think it should be. We'll talk about that in a second. You guys know me, you guys know the educational should, right? But what happened was is I ended up lowering my son's love of learning, and then we were frustrated. We were crying every day, both of us. He was crying, I was crying every day, and I was just, man, this is not the way it's supposed to be. It's so frustrating. You lose sleep, and really it's difficult to get back that love of learning the longer that you make these mistakes. So I really want to make sure that you guys don't make these mistakes, okay? And the problem also is that if we keep love of learning low, we end up, not only do we have frustrating times, but we don't end up where we want to go. We don't end up with lifelong learners and leaders who go out in the world and make this world better with their passions and their unique talents and gifts, right? That's what we want, right? If that sounds like you, if you're worried about that, if you're worried about, I don't want to get that, start off on the wrong foot, or man, I already did it. Ugh, we're in this place. Contact me. I'm going to put my contact information for you to book a free call with me in the chat. I'm going to put it in the show notes. If you're listening to this on the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's in the notes in the description. So please contact me and let's make a plan for how you can just refresh that and re-increase it, because I did. It's so great when you can do that right away and make that shift. And the beginning of the year is the best time to do that, right? But let's not get off on that foot in the first place. Let's prepare for not making these mistakes, okay? And you can get on if you're worried about making them, and I don't know how I'm going to reframe my mind. Let's talk too, okay? So let's go through these mistakes. Who's ready to go through these mistakes? You guys you're going to recognize some of these, I think, because I think you've already thought about them a lot. already? Maybe you've heard about them in a previous post that we had in our Facebook group where there was a couple of parents who said they actually both said the same thing, which is really, really interesting. And then we're going to also think about how we can overcome these or how we can reframe our mind. Okay. So, because a lot of it has to do, pretty much all these are, except for the last one, are all about the educational should, right? They're all in that educational should box. And if you don't know, I call the educational should is actually the thinking, the mindset that we have about what they should be learning at this grade age. We should be doing math every day or we're going to fail at life. They have to check boxes, right? It's our box checking. We have to do this amount of time. We have to do this for this subject matter with this curriculum, and we have to have a curriculum for every subject, and all the shoulding that you do on yourself and your kids. And if they've been to school, they might have some shoulds themselves, or your family and friends, your neighbors, society in general has all these shoulds, right? I want to make sure they're going to get to college, so I have to check all these boxes. There's actually a lot less box checking than you think. And that's what I help parents do. Okay. So we help get out of the box checking and we actually get into lifelong learning. So let's talk about these mistakes so that we can get out of the box checking, get out of the educational should, and we don't make these mistakes with our littles. Okay. So the first one is expecting too much. Expecting too much. Now, this was the number one answer that a couple of our parents had in the Facebook group, and they said expecting too much. And I think there's a lot that goes into that. So you have littles, you have preschoolers, you have kinder. I personally believe that this goes for first graders as well. I know I made all of these mistakes actually when we were starting first grade, and kinder and preschool, we did it much differently, which is kind of weird. But I made the mistakes when we first started first grade because I was like, okay, first grade, we're going to really learn now, right? And then that's not actually how I thought was going to work out, and we ended up learning less because love of learning dropped, right? So expecting too much has a lot of things in it. So, expecting too much for the kid's age. Now, I know this has a lot to do with our thinking as parents, as we want them to be advanced. I mean, your kids are geniuses. Let's just get that clear. I don't care if they have learning disabilities. I don't care if they have, neurodivergent whatevers. They are geniuses. But the educational should tells us that if they produce certain things, if they do certain things, then they're advanced, right? In quotation marks. And, but that doesn't mean that they are necessarily ready for those things, right? So there's certain standards, they should be reading at yada, yada, yada age, right? They should be doing handwriting. They should be writing letters at this and this age. I just had a parent tell me the other day that she was talking to her kids' private school because they were not sure if they were going to let her 5-year-old into kindergarten because he didn't know his full alphabet yet. Ugh! That is the educational should, people. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's kindergarten, okay? It's kindergarten, and he might not be ready for that yet, right? We're going to talk about more about readiness in just a second, but expecting too much, this happens a lot if you have an only child, like I did, or if you're with the oldest. The oldest you tend to expect more because you're like, you can totally handle it. It's totally fine, right? I'm just going to keep going, and we're just going to keep going. He's got this. We can do it. I just need, we need to do it more often, or we need to have a different curriculum or something like that. And we can be more advanced, and we can prove to everybody else that homeschooling works, man. I know what I'm doing. I can prove to myself that I know what I'm doing. We got this. I'm not going to mess my kid up. And we can also have this beautiful, present that we're giving to our child that prepares them for success in life. But expecting too much, sometimes we can push them too far than they're ready to go, and it doesn't allow them to do what's in their phase of learning to do. So when they're little, the phase of learning that they're in is about a lot of exploration, right? It's learning through touch, sound, taste, feel, right? Or feel and touch are the same, of course, hearing and, eyes and all these other senses, right? So it's important that we take into consideration what their phase of learning is. One of the things that my parents did for me, and I really loved, my sister and I both, is they were like, we're actually not trying to push you into school faster because we knew that you're going to spend 18 years in school that we don't, or it's not 18 years. Well, it is 18 years of college, but you're going to spend a lot of years in school, and we don't want to rush that. We just want to let you be kids. And I actually really appreciate that, because it actually meant, because my birthday's kind of like right around the cutoff. So they waited another year, and then I actually became like one of the older ones in my class. And it allowed me to have a little bit more maturity, which was good in some ways and not in good in some other ways. If you know what socially, it wasn't awesome, but but academically it was, I was prepared to do a lot of things. So expecting too much means a lot of things, but just be careful with your oldest kids and with your only child that you're not expecting too much. Does that make sense, you guys? Really think about that, okay? The second one we're going to talk about is too much time. So, and I mean too much time for formal learning. So, when they're little, remember what we talked about, right? About senses and all that stuff, and what phase of learning they're in. There's actually a whole series of, there's a way of thinking about your kids in terms of what phase they're in versus what grade or age they're in relation to their readiness, and what they quote unquote should be learning, or maybe what the main lessons are for those phases, and what your day might look like for those phases. There's this really, really amazing, it's called The Phases of Learning, Thomas Jefferson Education, absolutely fabulous. I teach that all the time. It's one of the things that changed my world. And one of the things about too much time is that one thing I did when I started with my son in first grade was, I was like, okay, we're going to sit down. I got all these workbooks. We're going to just do some learning. And like about 20 minutes in, he was, maybe even less than, I think it was like 15 minutes. He was pretty much done. He was like, okay, cool. And he started to walk away. And I'm like, whoa, wait, hold on. There's more. And he came back and he's like, okay, I'll do another little bit. And then he's like, I'm done about 10 minutes later. And he gets up and starts to walk away. And I'm like, but wait, there's more. We haven't done math. Oh my gosh, look at this cool math thing. We got to do this math, right? I'm cheerleading. How many of you guys know what I'm talking about? Like cheerleading your kids into doing stuff. And then, so he sits back down. He's a good boy. He wants to appease. So he does a little bit more. And then he's really done. We've only done like what? Half hour, 40 minutes at the most. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're going to fail at life. What is this craziness? And every day I could expect less and less and less, because I was trying to educational should him. I'm not saying that a half hour is the max or whatever, but I'm saying my mentality going into it was that I was expecting too much formal learning for that age group. He was a 6-year-old. What 6-year-old wants to sit there and do work pages all day? They don't. They don't. So think about how much time. If you're confused about that and you want to understand how much time is good, is a specific amount of time that's great for you, then definitely contact me. Okay. Just realize that in third grade, the kids are actively learning, the active learning time in school, in a regular school, public, private, whatever, a regular school day is 2 hours. 2 hours. Doesn't that blow your mind? So let's extrapolate that downward to for second, first, kinder, preschool. And let's think about that. Does that mean that they're not learning during those other times a day? Nope, that doesn't mean that. Because the third mistake is not knowing what curriculum is. Curriculum, as a former public high school English teacher, to me, is was I should say was, it's not anymore, but was a book, it was a class, it was something with a teacher, it was an instructional video, it was a documentary. It wasn't a lot of other things that don't look like that. And what I've learned through making all of these mistakes and having to reset love of learning and relearning a lot of things about and unlearning a lot of things about what I thought was real learning is that there's a lot of things in the world that are curriculum, right? And so that's one thing we talk about in the Inspiring Lifelong Learning program and the Raising Leaders Roadmap is what is actual real curriculum. Okay. So that educational should that you think I need a curriculum for every single subject for my kindergartner. No, you don't. No, you don't. My son is 15 years old. He's a sophomore in high school, would be sophomore in high school, whatever. I mean, we have to do that, check those boxes now. But we've never, ever had a history curriculum. We've never had a science curriculum that we've used on a regular basis. We've had science curriculums, but we just used them pretty haphazardly. But does that mean he's not learning science? Does that mean he's not learning history? Nope. That kid knows more about science than I do. He knows more about, sadly, he knows more about history than I do. We had yesterday, was it yesterday? I think it was the day before. He was listening to a talk that a leadership talk that we have CDs on from back in my leadership days and leadership development days, and he heard about the Articles of Confederation. And so he just took it upon him. He's read it before, but he took it upon himself to reread it. And he was doing something on the computer for a while, and I was like, "What are you doing, buddy?" And he was like, "Oh, actually," he says, and he had the Articles of Confederation, this book that has it in it, open in front of him, and he's typing, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm actually taking the good parts, the Articles of Confederation and the good parts of the Constitution, and I'm just doing a thought experiment." What 15-year-old on his own does a thought experiment academically? He's taking the two and meshing the good parts of them together and then adding in from his own research and own political and economic and government knowledge to be able to create something that was the best parts of everything. And I was like, he's laughing. He's like, it's just a little thought experiment. He's rewriting the Constitution by himself on his own. Wow. It's so awesome. It just blows my mind. Honestly, I don't even believe it half the time he does the stuff he does. This stuff happens all the time. And so it's really important to understand what curriculum is. It's all kinds of things. It's all kinds of things. And by the way, that level of love of learning and that kind of example is is the result of a consistent high level of love of learning for years and years and years. And you can get that. You just have to have the skills to be able to navigate the ups and downs and to get the thinking to create the culture and the environment in your home so that you can keep that going. It's so fun. It blows my mind every single day. Okay, so now let's talk about the fourth mistake that parents make with preschoolers and kinders is not looking or responding to readiness. So you're not looking for responding to readiness is really a big issue because if kids aren't ready for something, ugh, and you keep pushing, that's going to cause a lot of frustration. Been there. Who's been there with me? I've been there over and over and over again. I've learned what those signs are, and I've learned how to redirect and how to navigate the readiness so that I know where to go from there. It's really, really important because as soon as you keep pushing, the frustration, they're frustrated, and then you get frustrated and you will lower love of learning instantaneously. That's why my son hated writing for like 8 years because I pushed when I shouldn't have. And then I had to redirect and I had to reignite his love of writing. And now he's writing a book. Now he's written articles. He's rewriting the Constitution by himself. I mean, this kind of craziness happens, but how many years did we waste with his lack of confidence in writing because I pushed too hard, right? So it's not that we didn't do any writing in there, but we did it in a way that helped build his confidence back up. So I can talk to you more about that if that sounds like you, but it can happen can happen with reading, it could happen with math, it can happen with anything, science, whatever, art happens with anything. Okay. With just learning in general, that happens, right? Lower love of learning. So we can do something about that. So, how about the fifth one now? How about the fifth one? Not clarifying your end goals. I know you have littles and they're so cute and they're so wonderful and they're just full of joy and you've all this time with them, but there will be a time when they're ready to leave your home, when they're ready to go out in the world, when they're done with high school, whatever end point you want to get to, that is your end goal. What that looks like to you, that kid, what he looks like then, what she looks like then, is your end goal. And that's something that's very important to identify right now. Because if you're not doing the things that get them there, then we have our ladder on the wrong wall. If we have it in the boxes and we're trying to create lifelong learners and we're just box checking, we're not going to get lifelong learners. We have to make sure that we're doing the things that help us get to the results like we want to receive at the end, like we want to raise up, right? So we want to make sure we clarify those end goals. And that is something that oh my gosh, that is one of the very first things we do in Inspiring Lifelong Learning Program and in the Raising Leaders Roadmap as a whole. So the Raising Leaders Roadmap actually gets you from where you are now to the leaders and the lifelong learners that go out in the world and make this world a better place, right? It gets you to that point. The first section of it is the Inspiring Lifelong Learning Program that really helps you lay the foundation for securing the skills that create a culture and environment to where love of learning is consistently high, to where you get things like a kid that goes out and rewrites the Constitution based on all the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution and all the things he's researched. And he even said yesterday, he said, "Oh, I didn't do much writing yesterday. I actually did more researching." And I'm like, okay, yes, that's what you need to do sometimes, right? Before you start writing. It's that cool. You guys, it's so awesome. We had a whole discussion yesterday about what he's writing and about it was literally a discussion that went so far to where he's using the words yeah, the Articles of Confederation, they were basically, they were really good in limiting big government, but basically they didn't ensure any monetary allocation or no, monetary appropriation. That's what he said. Monetary appropriation to make sure that happened. And I was like, what 15-year-old uses the words monetary appropriation? It's awesome. And we were talking about big ideas and really important things about humanity and human nature and looking at, different documents and saying, what does this assume about human nature and what does this assume about human nature and what does that have to do with creating a government and how that works? Oh my gosh, you guys. Literally, and I stopped and was like, buddy, never in my life, and I taught a lot of 15 and 16-year-old sophomores were my favorite things to teach. I said, never in my life have I had this level of academic conversation with a 15, 16-year-old. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's amazing. But if I had not clarified the person that I wanted to raise, that I wanted the results to get, then I wouldn't know this. I wouldn't I didn't know that my ladder was heading in the right direction, right? Leaning against the right wall. And so I talked with parents who are parents of sophomores who say, wow, we've never even thought about who we wanted to raise. I'm like, oh my gosh. Let's start now. Please, let's start now. So think about that with littles. Where are we going? Where are we going? And that's again one of the very first things we do in the Inspiring Lifelong Learning program. So if you're interested in learning more about that, if you want to just chat, please contact me. You guys, I love talking with you. I love hearing about what your goals are, what your dreams are for your kids, what challenges you're having, what you want to set up, and how you want to set it up. And we'll make a plan from there and we'll go for it. I'm just excited to talk with you. I'm excited to see where you're going. And I love your littles. And this is the best time to lay the foundation. So you don't have to backtrack later and unlearn all the things. And then the kids have to unlearn all the box checking and the educational shoulds. Don't make the same mistake I did, right? So let's chat. Let's figure out where you're at and how we can get you on the path to make sure that doesn't happen. You guys, this has been so exciting. And next week, we're going to have a guest talking about how your kids with their health can handle, especially their gut health and how it can affect their learning. That's going to be interesting too, huh? Nikki Golly will be up with us, and she's absolutely fabulous. I love her. So I am super excited, you guys. It's going to be so fun. Again, if you have questions about anything, please put in the chat, schedule a call with me, and that link will be in the chat, in the description, and in the show notes. I'll talk to you again next week. Bye bye.